Hi, I'm Collette G, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the Amber Heard and the Johnny Depp case. Apparently, Johnny Depp has taken Amber Heard to court. She's countersued for defamation of character about an article that she wrote accusing Johnny Depp of being a wife beater.
In Mr. Depp's 58 years, not a single woman has ever accused him of violence. And nobody in Hollywood or the world had any reason to believe he was an abuser until Ms. Heard publicly accused him in 2016.
I want to go into more details about what are the warning signs of domestic violence. I also want to talk about the cycle of violence, and I also want to talk about power and control. Let me start out by saying that anyone could be affected by domestic violence and abuse. Domestic violence is not something that only happens to people who don't have money or an education. Domestic violence can happen to educated individuals, any race, any religion, any ethnicity, and it can happen to people of any economic status. Domestic violence is also referred to as intimate partner violence, relationship violence, and/or domestic abuse. And it happens when one partner exhibits a series of patterns of behaviors to exert power and control over the other partner within that relationship. Let's get into what some of the warning signs might be and break down a little bit about how this actually happens and what happens in the cycle of violence so that we can get a better understanding of what might be happening in the case with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Now, I have no opinion one way or another, but I just want to give some more context to why she may have stayed or why he may have stayed in the relationship, regardless which one of them was the victim, which one was the aggressor. It's important for you to understand this. And so some of the warning signs might be the following. So your partner may try to belittle you or put you down and or shame you.
Have you witnessed any occasions on which Ms. Heard wasn't nice to your brother?
I have, actually.
Would you please describe those to the jury?
Yeah. We had, I had on one occasion, because this one really stayed with me. On one occasion, I was at the office and I'd had a meeting with Dior, who had wanted to sit with Johnny and talk about working together. And Amber had come in and asked if she was interrupting us, and we said no, and we weren't supposed to really talk about the meeting with anyone. But Johnny told Amber that I had just had a meeting with Dior, and that they were interested in him. Her reaction to that was she was in disbelief and sort of disgust because she said, Dior, why would Dior want to do business with you? They're about class and they're about style, and you don't have style. So it was the insulting kind of taking away that one moment, that insult is there.
Your partner may show extreme jealousy of you spending time with your family, friends, or loved ones, and they may also try to isolate you and keep you to themselves or behave like they're jealous when you do decide to go off to do the things that you love doing. Your partner may try to prevent you from making your own decisions and or poking fun at the decisions that you make for yourself, and may try to control your decision making. They may also try to get you to perform sexual acts that you're not comfortable participating in with them or with other partners. They may also try to get you to participate in unhealthy behaviors like drug abuse or alcohol consumption. They may also try to use intimidation, whether it's looks or stare or raising of the voice or throwing things. But intimidation can also come in, you know, holding a knife to you, a weapon of sorts, a gun, a bat, or anything, or an object, or throwing things at you. They may also use forms of destroying things in your home that either belong to you, that are personal and dear to you, or even if they belong to them, just as a form of intimidation to express their power and control. And this usually plays out in rage. Now, in the Amber Heard and the Johnny Depp case, if you saw the opening statements, we heard a lot from both sides that were exhibiting some of these behaviors that I've talked about, but particularly from Amber Heard's side of the case, they talked a lot about the rage, referred to Johnny Depp as being the monster, which is something they claim that he referred to himself as.
And he said some very significant words. I thought I had put the monster away for good. That's what he said to her that day.
They talked about him destroying property, throwing things, physically hurting and assaulting her, and a lot of the things that I just discussed on this list. These are the warning signs. If you think that you're in a violent relationship with someone, or you know someone that is in a violent relationship and you think that you need help, feel free to reach out to me. I'm a certified violence prevention specialist that can direct you to tools and resources to get help. But also, if you need immediate help, you can call 1-800-799-7233. So let's go on to what is power and control. So I'm going to put up this wheel here, and this is one of several different wheels that are used to talk about what domestic violence entails, and this goes into a lot of details, and I will leave a link in the description section so that you can download this for yourself if you want to learn more about what power and control is and recognize what an abusive relationship might look like. Some of the things on this list might also be in unhealthy relationships, but like I said, unhealthy relationships are not always abusive relationships, but abusive relationships are always unhealthy. We're talking about physical violence and sexual violence, and it goes into using coercion and threats. So like I talked about, making or carrying out threats to do something to hurt someone, threatening to leave someone or commit suicide. We're also talking about using intimidation, making the other person feel afraid with looks, actions, gestures, using emotional abuse, putting them down, making them feel bad about themselves, or name calling, isolation, controlling what they do, who they see, who they talk to, minimizing, denying, and blaming, making light of the abuse by saying the abuse didn't happen, using children, and sometimes if there are children in a relationship, so they might make the person feel guilty about leaving and using the kids as a pawn, using male privilege. In the last video that I shared about the Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith situation, and I'll put the link here, I talked about how violence often happens mostly to males because males are in fact more likely to commit violent acts. So males are usually more likely to have acts of violence committed against them. But when it comes to domestic violence and sexual assault, that is more likely to happen towards women and children. Using male privilege, threatening her like a servant, or making all these big decisions and not giving her any types of room to make decisions for herself, using economic abuse, like preventing her from getting a job or making her own money.
Now, it's during these rages that Mr. Depp engaged in verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse of Amber.
When it comes to the Amber Heard and the Johnny Depp case, I mean, there's plenty from Johnny Depp's side and Amber Heard's side. where they both talk about and accuse the other of being the aggressor and the abuser in the relationship. Both can be true.
You're also going to hear evidence about Ms. Heard. You're going to learn that she's a profoundly troubled person who manipulates the people around her just like she manipulated Mr. Depp.
Sometimes a victim becomes the abuser. And so we don't know in this case whether or not the victim is Johnny Depp or Amber Heard. And like I said, that's not for me to make that decision, but we'll all keep on watching. And obviously a jury of their peers will make the decision on whether or not Johnny Depp is credible or Amber Heard. You know, this isn't a criminal case, but when we do talk about domestic violence and abuse and victims who are in situations like this, it is very hard to prove. And so one of the things that victims would likely do is gather a lot of data and information so that they can prove that the abuse is happening. But the state always wants to make sure that an innocent person is not being accused of committing acts of violence against someone just because that person says it happened. It's not the easiest thing to prove. Most likely victims will be offered a temporary restraining order, or in other words, an order of protection, but or it's called a stay away order, and that doesn't necessarily make the victim feel safe if any of the things that I talked about is happening to them, but it's usually the start of the process unless some more severe information or proof is available for this individual, for the victim in the relationship to say, this is what's happening to me and I can prove it.
So during the press trips, that's when they started dating and by both accounts fell madly in love. She loved the side of Johnny that we see in the movies, the charismatic one, the charming one, the generous one. That's the man she fell in love with. But sadly, the monster came in the way. And that monster would come out when he was drinking and when he would take the drugs.
In the beginning, when two parties meet, the abuser does not show up with a baseball bat in one hand and flowers in the other. They're usually very charming, very kind, very sweet, very, just everything that you've probably been looking for. And then all of a sudden, slowly but surely, the behavior begins to creep out. So in the first phase we're talking about is the calm phase, where everything just seems beautiful and bliss. Then over time, tensions will begin to raise, right? Because the individual might start name calling, nitpicking, trying to control where you go, who you call. So in the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp case, Amber Heard's attorney accuses Johnny Depp of controlling her phone by saying that she couldn't put a code on the phone, and he always wanted to know who she was talking to or what kind of part she was going to take in the movies, whether she had a romantic scene or not. He was controlling, and that could be construed as the tension phase. And then what happens after that phase goes on and on, tensions rise and rise, and we all know what happens after tensions rise. For some times it needs to be released, or in the case of domestic violence and intimate violence or relationship violence, the abuse happens, the explosion happens. So that can look like yelling, screaming, sexual assault, physical assault, or it could be getting in, intimidating that person and making them feel extremely, extremely afraid. During this phase, as it winds down, the person then gets to the makeup phase where they apologize for the abuse ever happening and make promises never to do it again. They may bring flowers, they may bring candy. In the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, we hear from Amber Heard's attorney that Johnny Depp apologized the first time that he slapped her to the floor.
Then Johnny came off the sofa, got on his knees, started crying, told her he was very, very sorry that he had done this. It would never happen again.
He promised he would never do it again. And she, loving him, decides to stay, and they make up. And this cycle of violence happens over and over and over again. And eventually the violence happens longer and longer, and the calm and tension phases get shorter and shorter. The honeymoon phase gets shorter and shorter, and the violence gets longer and longer until eventually sometimes victims lose their lives. And luckily in the case with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, they were able to separate and move on with their lives, so it would seem. But because domestic violence, relationship violence, intimate partner violence is not about just the physical abuse, it's about power and control. Here they both are sitting in court. Now, granted, Johnny Depp took Amber Heard to court for defamation, but is this a sign of power and control because she's moved on with her life? That's yet to be seen. Now, the question always is why do people abuse other individuals, or why must someone exert power and control over another individual? And the answer to that is because abusive people believe they have the right to control and restrict their partner's lives. And often because they somehow have convinced themselves that their feelings, their emotions, and everything that they think is more important than their partners.
Now, Amber she grew up in an abusive family. Her father abused her mother, and sometimes she and Whitney. So she had that cycle in there, just as you've heard that Johnny had that cycle in his house. And so what's the normal to them is a little bit more difficult than some of us can understand.
Amber Heard and Johnny Depp both grew up in a home with abusive parents. And often abuse is a learned behavior, but sometimes others are learning it from culture, where, as men are taught to be strong and do this or do that to women to exert control in the relationship. Or some couples or people watch movies and they see this type of behavior being normalized and made to be sexy, to, dominate your woman or get control of your man. But in my case, I grew up in a family where I witnessed violence, and I was in a violent relationship. And now today I used that story to stand on it as a platform to help all of you create loving, happy relationships in your lives. And also I teach preventative measures. And that is something that we can each do to create a society that is free from all of this violence, whether it's in our homes or whether it's in our communities. We should say no to violence. Even like I mentioned in the Will Smith case, violence is never the answer. Regardless of the past circumstances that Johnny Depp had or Amber Heard had in their past lives, or their financial circumstances, or anything that they're going through presently or in the past, no one deserves to have someone exert power and control over them. Each individual is responsible for his or herself, and that means that abuse is never okay. Like I said, in addition to helping individuals create and sustain healthy, happy, loving, meaningful relationships, I also help individuals to come out of abusive relationships, heal from toxic and abusive relationships, and I work within communities to create communities free from domestic violence, sexual assault, and abuse. So if you need help, feel free to reach out to me, or you can visit my website at findinghappily.com, and we can take that journey together. Thanks for watching.